Yeah, all right. Let's say over to you, Darryl. And many of you know where Darryl's coming from. That's probably why you're here. And we're looking forward to what's happening tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, George.
Lift it up for a sec.
So it's been a while since I've spoken publicly. I started up the Community Law Resource Group back in 2001, 2002, as a result of being part of a group that annexed all of Australia's national estate. Okay. So Australia's national estate has all been annexed. Do we understand the word annexed?
But which Australian estates? I'm not clear on that.
So all of Australia's national estate. Australia is made up of a series of parishes. Okay? And because of the misbehaviour of the Australian governments, the only thing left in law that could be possibly done to override what misbehaviour has taken place is to annex each parish. Okay, so that needed the body of English law to step in, and an annexation document was drafted, hand drafted, pertaining to each parish around Australia. And it made up a body of paperwork 10,000 pages long. And that was handed up to the Queen at Westminster on the 15th of June 1992. And they had 7 years to legally contest that annexation as to, with respect to any mistakes that could be challenged in a proper quorum judice court. And the Queen, 2 years after the annexation was applied to Westminster, at the beginning to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, I think at that time was held in Brisbane, she announced, "I wish the secessionists of Australia well." Okay. 7 years after 1992, which was the last referendum. And what was the question? What was the question in 1999? Do we become a republic, or do we remain with the monarchy? And we said, we'll remain with what we know. So Australia is essentially legally under the heading of the Principality of Caledonia, which was the name of the annexation. So then my job was to promote that to the general public, because under the Constitution here in Australia, you, the people, are the supreme, uncontrollable authority. Because no law can be passed without your will being expressed. And that's just the way the law is here. And it was drafted through the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act. And what is that act?
It's a check on governments.
No, first and foremost, it's a contract. It's a contract between Australia and the United Kingdom and the rest of the Commonwealth nations that form that political union. Okay, it's a contract. Contract law always prevails between two consenting parties. Okay, it will override statute law. Contract law is predominant. Always has been. So the consent and the will of the people here in Australia was to be a member of that Commonwealth through that contract with the United Kingdom. And that's why that Commonwealth Constitution Act is so very important, because the first 8 clauses are England's jurisdiction, not Australia, but they apply to Australia. That's the binding clauses, the binding terms and conditions on both countries. Okay. Very important. This is why the system here now is desperately trying to change, especially the preamble, to the before clause 1. So my job has been to wake you all up as to what the hell's going on. And that's when Community Law Resource Group started up, and here I am today. A little bit further down the track, but still trying to wake people up. It's a bit hard because the system realised I've been there promoting this, and they've been trying to counter whatever I put up to the general public. They're very scared when I go public because I've been up in front of their best lawyers and they just remain silent. I've been in court that much, I've lost count, and usually either the judge walks out or they put me in my own courtroom. So, and then they stopped that about 4 years ago, and the orders went out, we don't want this guy in our courtrooms again. Okay, so I've just stepped away. But then I've had to go into the private, okay, because there are 2 distinct jurisdictions operating. One is private and one's public. And when you analyse the public, that comes through that Constitution Act that was drafted at Federation. And in 1973, they brought in their own version of public. And it's actually headed private law. Okay? But unless you know it's there, then you just think that this is all public. It's not. And that treaty was signed off through the Attorney General in 1973 under the Whitlam government. And the treaty is called the Unidroit Treaty, which is the unification of private law to be implemented in the member nation. There are 63 nations. Australia is in the executive arm of those 63 nations. They're in the top 25, and our representative is a gentleman by the name of Roger Wilkins. And he used to be with the Attorney General's Department up until 2014. And when he left, he retired, he went over to Rome, which is where the headquarters of Unidroit is. His leaving speech was based around, I hope that within the next few years, all of the people's rights have been removed here in Australia. Because this is what they've been dictating gradually since 1973, through the Unidroit Treaty, through the Attorney General's Department. The Attorney General is the signature, that's the office that is directly tied to Unidroit. Okay. They oversee all municipal law, transport law, contract law, franchise law, banking law. They cover local government. They cover all aspects of law. Okay, so it's until you know about Unidroit, then you're lost, wondering what the hell's going on, and where is all of this stuff coming from. Because when you read the Constitution, you very quickly wake up that in fact the parliamentarians cannot express anything other than the will of their constituents on the Parliament, on the floor of Parliament. So how do we know? We just take it for granted. Do any of us go up and say, well, can you show us how many of your constituents actually express their will to you to
Yes,
vote accordingly in that on the floor
we
of
do,
Parliament?
and they lie to our face blatantly.
And do we ask for the statistics?
Yep.
We've got to. There's one way to really beat this system up until a few years ago, and that is to step into your parliamentarian's office and say, well, come on, I'm here to express my will and I'm here to find out how you've gone about bringing about these bills that have turned into laws, and start communicating with these people. Because while we've been complacent, there have been other parties, interested parties, who have stepped in and expressed their will, and of course they're looking around going, well, no one else is here, oh well, I guess I'll pass that through. And the Australian people have no idea about this constitution.
Our state MP told us, our last state MP told us to our face, I am not here to do your will. To our face.
Now, under the section 46 of the Constitution, you would then have them removed.
Yes.
So that Constitution is, it's foreseen all of these problems that we're now suffering, and it's providing an answer. And until you wake up to what it's saying, then you'll be looking for ways other than what the law prescribes as to bring about a remedy. And it really doesn't work.
So you said, and that changed a couple of years ago then,
Yeah.
so what's happened?
Well, what's happened is, in 2016 I was put in as an advisor to a senator from the federal parliament in the 45th parliament. That was Senator Cullerton, Rodney Cullerton, from Western Australia, and he was gutsy enough to put up our maiden, what I'd sued the Commonwealth over in 2004 here in the County Court in Victoria, and that was with respect to the performance of the High Court. So the High Court, we lost our High Court in 1973, between 73 and 1979. The High Court is now a corporate institution, it's a trading company, like all of our courts.
Does it have an ABN?
No, no, it has shareholders though. So, but when you go to the High Court in Canberra,
So it's got an ACN then?
well, no,
I've got
it's,
ACNs and ABNs, that's mine.
yeah, it's not really you've got to go overseas to see its corporate face. It's not here in Australia. They don't want to make it that obvious. Although I have, in an immigration case many years ago, confronted the head of the federal court at the time, Finkelstein, as to the ABN number that the federal court did bear, and his excuse was, well, we need the ABN because of GST, and we need the ABN in order to purchase stationery and the running of the court. And I said, well, unfortunately, that's not really the case. Really what you should have is a set of terms and conditions before you enter the courtroom. Because that's the corporate side of any corporation relies on its terms and conditions. And it's all based on consent. They cannot harass, they cannot coerce any of us to take of their goods or services. And I caught him out, and he had what we were debating verified during that case. And he basically sat back and just went, okay, what is it you want?
Did you get it?
What we got was a response which was exposing foreign influence. And he said, listen, my hands are tied. Yeah. Okay.
Didn't
And
that
that's-
show up in our money, in our currency at that time? When
Oh,
the
no,
currency
this
changed?
is only a few years ago. Our currency has been changing gradually since decimal.
Yeah, I've noticed with $50, great big 5 and a little
Yeah.
O, and
Oh, it goes back further.
it just
Yeah,
always
when they
changes.
slipped from pounds, shillings and pence was when we flipped over to the fractional reserve system. But we were actually there in 1959 as well. So, and you can take it back to 1936. So, you know, that's sort of a separate argument. But essentially, what we've seen is a breakdown of our constitution with respect not only your voice, but more importantly, as the flyer that George put out, with respect to these commissions. So we've got these entities called ASIC, okay, the ACCC.
Toothless tiger.
Yeah, but are they legally able to express their position to whether we've got a grievance with a corporation or whoever? Can they legitimately bring about a remedy under the Constitution? No, they can't. Okay, they've been put up, and this has been one of the aims of the unknown, the bureaucrats that have sat in Parliament since Federation. Their aim has been to dismantle the real judicial power in this country. And according to the Constitution, that is the Parliament. Whether you like it or not, guys, that's Section 49 and Section 50 of the Constitution dictate very clearly that's the High Court. That's the highest court in this country.
The bureaucrats in the parliament.
That's right.
That's what I always thought.
Section 49 is, the history of Section 49 is immense. And in fact, when the framers of our Constitution assembled this Constitution, they were of course reflecting upon the Westminster, and they thought, let's just give our Senate a little bit more power than the House of Lords. And that's what they did. Every parliament has a jail in it.
Wow.
They can put people in jail. Section 49 allows each house to sit judicially. Section 50 allows both houses to sit together as one big court.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it is a very powerful institution. Section 72 of the Constitution says that when a judge misbehaves, the Parliament can throw him out. They appoint the judges, they remove the judges.
How does the corporate seal that's on the Australian Constitution that the MP's office will hand out, it's got the corporate seal on it versus the proper?
That's the mirror image. That's the colour
This is the new.
of law. This is Unidroit. So the moment Unidroit was brought in through the Whitlam government, they had to set up a mirror image of the laws that have been passed since Federation and before Federation. And that mirror image, the colour of law, has been what we've been falling under, and it's come through the Unidroit Treaty.
And Darryl, weren't they meant to sit together over the Carlton matter? Because that's what I was writing to the President of the Senate, that they were supposed to sit together and decide his fate.
His fate was already decided by the Parliament. The Senate found under motion 163 that was passed, that was our last day in Parliament, which was the 1st of December 2016. We knew what the system was doing and why they were targeting us. They were desperate to get us out because we're about to pull the rug out from the whole system. And they knew it, especially when they found out I was in there. They panicked. They absolutely panicked. So we managed to get Jackie Lambie on side, and she seconded a motion in the Parliament, 4:30 on December the 1st. And we got the Parliament to pass the referral of Cullerton to the High Court, or the Court of Disputed Returns, was faulty. So the question mark was, who had misbehaved within the Parliament? It was the Attorney General and the President of the Senate. They had orchestrated the removal of Cullerton through a Section 44 application. We then put to the Parliament that that was faulty, and the evidence we placed before the Parliament was enough to get us a vote in our favour, and the vote was 37 to 25. So we won the day. And basically the Parliament said, no one can touch Cullerton until we reassemble in 2017 on the 4th of February. And then we will hear motion 163. Now, when a Parliament passes a motion, that's it. It's an estoppel in law. It's an estoppel. Nothing can progress until motion 163 has been satisfied. And that's in the rules of the Senate. It's called Odges, Rules of the Senate. And the Odges rules are updated every few years, but they've been around since Federation. Okay. And they dictate specifically what the Senate can and cannot do. So the rules there quite clearly say each motion must be dealt with, not may, must. Okay. So then the High Court, sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns, 6 days later, a full bench, there were actually 5 justices, including the Chief Justice, Susan Kieffer. Now, Susan had just been appointed as the Chief Justice of the High Court. And you can go to the High Court website and you can actually see, it was filmed that day, the activities of that day. And the barrister that we had representing us and the Attorney General's department AGS lawyer both put applications to the court to have the matter adjourned because the Parliament had said, right, no one can do anything to Cullerton because the referral is faulty. Okay, you can't move. So the High Court...
in ignorance of that estoppel, correct?
Yeah, and the High Court then said, well, hang on, we'll adjourn this. And Kiefel and the other 4 judges wandered off. Then they came back about 20 minutes later and she sat down and you could see the body language of the other justices. They didn't want to be there. Their chairs were turned on a 30-degree angle ready to run. And she just looked straight in the eyes of the bar table and said, I'm striking out the first 9 parts of Cullerton's affidavit with respect to an adjournment, and I'm going ahead with the trial. So she rose above. It's a principle in law called, was established in the 50s through what was called the communist case in the High Court. And it was stream rising above its source. So the High Court, sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns, had risen above its jurisdictional limits.
Ultra vires, right?
Totally. And we were then left suffering the consequences. And of course, when the system attack anybody that attacks them, the first step they make is bankruptcy. So they'll bankrupt you. And this is what they did on the 19th of December. So this, a matter of 2 weeks later, he was up in front of bankruptcy. Now there's a law, it's called the Parliamentary Privileges Act, 1987. It comes from section 49 of the Constitution, and it says very clearly, Article 9 of the Bill of Rights, prevail. No parliamentarian can be exposed to any public courts whatsoever while they are in Parliament. Okay? Because they are in a separate jurisdiction. They're in the highest court in this land. And the Quick-and-Garran describes the Senate as the High Court of Parliament. It is so powerful. And these people, since Federation, have been trying to undo that parliamentary power by installing commissions. ASIC, the ACCC. And now we have, since 2012, a Judicial Misbehaviour Commission. And every step that has been taken down the path of a commission has been done under the power of a Labor government. Labor is the worst political institution ever that's been installed anywhere around the world. They are deliberately attacking the basic body of law. I'm actually halfway through doing a paper just to show you in the 20th century what Labor has done to state and federal law here in Australia. You would hang every single one of them by the rope without hesitation for what they have done.
Let's do it.
Well, there's a process to take place.
We've got plenty of rope.
So what do I stand to gain from this? What's, I'm listening, there's quite a lot of pieces to this puzzle, so I'm hearing, I agree with Parliament, and that's the High Court of the land, but we still have a Governor General.
No,
we still have judges swearing an allegiance to the Queen, and Parliament can remove, Parliament is the only way you can remove a judge. I've removed two personally myself, so I've done it, and I'm just a lay person, so I've had two judges removed from the bench, and I'm looking at my third now, and it's cost me a lot. So there seems to be a lot of, it comes down to this subjective opinion. So when you tell me that story about the High Court and the judge has taken this upstream, I understand the concept. The fact is she's done it. Now, why hasn't anyone gone back to the High Court and said, sorry, you can't do that?
She said, she passed a message on through our barrister.
Yeah.
And the barrister we were using at that particular time, that was in mid-2018, used to be the Solicitor General.
Right.
Okay. Queen's Counsel. We've had, since Carlton was thrown out, we've had probably 4 Queen's Counsel approach us and say you've been removed unlawfully.
Yeah.
But the message they got back after we were in Canberra in front of Kifle, on a separate application, was, we don't care what you do, Carlton will never get back into Parliament.
So what's really happening there then? What's really happening?
Oh, this is the Attorney General. This is a breakdown of the separation of powers.
Yeah.
This is direct influence from the Attorney General to the High Court.
Yeah.
And the High Court bowing down to that. Now, you've got to look at the timeline. Now, the Chief Justice of the High Court at the time was Justice French. Right, now, he had announced publicly he wasn't going to retire until March of 2017. He gets the first application relating to Carlton in front of him, and he started panicking. He just said, I'm out of here. I can see the influences coming from internally that I shouldn't be getting influence from. So he ran. And then Keifel was put in place. And she was just the pit bull. She just didn't care. She was out there to do a job, whatever was prescribed to her by the powers behind the system. And that's predominantly the Attorney General. And this is George Brandis and the President of the Senate at the time, who's tied up well and truly into the Port Arthur.
Yep. Compromise.
You know, these people, there's a quorum of these people that have been dictating this control. There are essentially 24 bureaucrats that run the whole show. They write all of the speeches, they write every word that's spoken on the floor of Parliament to both Liberal, Labor or Greens. It doesn't matter. You know, party doesn't matter at all. It's just these bureaucrats who
Darryl,
you would
have we
pass in the
identified?
street, you wouldn't know them.
Have we identified
Well, that's
the
the shadow
24?
government, yes.
No, not
Okay, so what's really, can you define what the power really is for us then? Because it's certainly not the law, is it?
Oh, the law is still there, and it's the Crown can do no wrong. Okay, the Crown is a body of law that's been established over a couple of thousand years that can do no wrong. But the people who administer that law, of course, are vulnerable, and you'll find that 95% of the laws that exist relate straight back to those in government as to what they can or cannot do. But they have been trying to hoodwink all of us and put up the smoke and mirrors to distract us and make us take the burden and not them. But the law is the one thing they're scared of. And when we wake up to what the law prescribes, that's when you'll see dust trails. Okay, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So it's really about consciousness and awareness. That's really the fundamental issue. Yeah.
If you know there's 24, how come you don't know who they are?
Because I wasn't in there long enough. I was doing 12, 14-hour days in the Parliament. I was there from 7 until it was 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night.
How can we
midnight.
find out who they are?
Yeah, there are people that would know, but it really at this point doesn't matter. What they did to Cullerton, they basically broke their own fingers when they did what they did. So that caused me to go to London, and I'm the first person to have filed in London from Australia since 1981.
Are they all Fabians?
Oh, it doesn't matter really. It doesn't matter whether they're part of the whatever club.
Montpellier is the other one.
The law will always prevail. And this is where we need to focus. We focus on what the law says. What the law always has a remedy. Always has.
The impression I'm getting is that you got a whole bunch of bureaucrats and power brokers that go around writing everything that they need to cover every base that they need to do whatever they want.
That's right.
And the way your question was, well, what power is there for us? All that writing does not undo what was there, the foundations.
That's right.
And basically it comes down to volition, I realise. They're going to tell you what's what. And you've got to turn around and say, and tell them, actually, this is what's what.
No, that's where we've got to step back. So what does the law prescribe as a remedy? It's called presumption. What does presumption mean?
Educated guess.
Presumption means that when they make a claim based on a law or whatever that they've provided or that's in the statute books, our response is, Well, you're relying on a presumption. And once you've said that, the onus is on them to provide evidence that that law has followed proper due process. And where do we get our proper due process from?
Constitution.
The Constitution. It dictates very clearly what it takes for a law to become a law.
Aren't the courts disagreeing with the Constitution being relevant?
Absolutely, but then we ask, is this a Chapter 3 court? And the language we use is this court operating coram judice? You heard me say that earlier. Do we understand what that means?
No.
Coram judice is Latin for a court with a proper judge. And when a judge gives an order, it must be an order through what's called a judge's certificate, which is where you find the order that they've brought about at the particular case. They've signed it and their name's clearly there and the seal of the court's there. There's also known as coram non judice. So this is someone pretending to be a court. And we've also got coram. This is all spelled C-O-R-A-M. And what's a quorum?
Resentment.
We're in a quorum now.
We're a group.
It's just, I'm either in front of an individual or a group. But they have no judicial power. The only judicial power can stem from a basis in law. And that can only be, in Australia, a Chapter 3 court. Or under Section 118, under a court that stems back to and utilising the laws of England. The court here in Australia can only exercise with the laws of England, because every act passed by our Parliament is subject to the Constitution. Every act, doesn't matter whether you're in Upper Kambukta West, Tasmania, or New Zealand, because New Zealand is a state of Australia. Whether they like it or not, that's just a fact.
It's in the Constitution.
I was just going to give you all the light comedy relief. Remember, just a surreal experience I had, but you were saying a couple of years ago when I was following on Know Your Rights feeds and shows and stuff, and you were talking about at the exact moment Cullerton got the axe and this and that and the other, and obviously Brandis was right in the guts of it. And that's when I sort of heightened in my mind. I was like, oh, okay, you're just about the most evil prick I've ever heard of now on planet Earth. And I was like, oh, that's pretty, I'd lock that in my brain as a mental note. Then it was only like a couple of weeks later, I go to the 7-Eleven, pick up a newspaper, and the front page said, George cries for our people. And there was something about he's going to create these police state laws because someone got police or someone got hurt or whatever, or something along these lines. And Georgie shed a tear publicly, and the media managed to catch that illustrious moment. They put the picture of Georgie having a cry on the front paper saying, George cries for our people. I was like, you just sold one up the river 2 weeks ago, and that's the way the media portrays him, as this all wonderful, amazing, awesome top bloke,
Yeah.
And then he leaves the office and he's like, well done, you did such a good job.
That particular day where the tear was coming out his eye was in the Senate. And what he had in front of him was the rip we'd just served on him.
Can you just go back for a minute to ASIC being, someone yelled out the toothless tiger?
Yeah.
Just briefly, I have a couple of cases happening, and each time, so there's been in total 6 hearings or something now, and each time ASIC was mentioned because it's relevant, the judges did sit up and pay attention every time.
Yeah.
They actually got their pens going when they heard ASIC. So there's some fear, but I don't know what it is.
Well, predominantly, that fear comes through this piece of legislation. It's called the Australian Securities and Commission Act 2001. So, and this is what most lawyers don't know. They're not taught this law. And I've witnessed being many times in the courts, especially the federal court, I've witnessed judges just rolling their eyes when lawyers start talking, the Trade Practices Act or Competition Consumer Act. It's all to do with the banking institution or an insurance company or whatever, and the judge just goes, listen, just get out of here and do your homework, will you, please, and start looking at the ASIC Act. Because if you want to bring a financial institution or an insurance company up for misconduct, this is the only legislation that matters.
Why?
In that sense, because it was drafted specifically ASIC and oversee the financial institutions and insurance companies.
But haven't we just agreed that they're useless?
And we have, but when you work, we've had to play both sides of the fence at some time. But up until 2016, yes, you'd get some wins, and we were actually beating some financial institutions. Perpetual Trustees was a classic case.
Is
2011.
that the act that says that the banks can come into depositors' private bank accounts and take their deposits if there's a financial crash?
No, that's a
Is that
Crisis
the act
Powers
it's
and
under?
Other Measures Resolution Act passed the 14th February 2018.
That's a statute.
Doesn't that?
No, it's just a modern
They
statute.
must have more or less sense.
But-
It's in
And they didn't
Canada.
have a forum to do it
There
either,
is
so
a
it's
way
unlawful.
to explain to me
They didn't have enough
what
people.
is a
We can
private
lobby
law
to do
versus
that.
a government law or whatever? I have no
Come
concept
here.
how a private
Well,
law
a lot of people are
operates.
getting up dealt with 10
I cannot get that. I have no...
And this is why predominantly they stopped me from going into the courts and why I had to step into the private. Because when I went into the courts, I racked up an enormous amount of debt, according to them, because I'd been in and out of the courts. I hadn't spent a cent. I'd beaten them. I'd beaten the Commonwealth in 2007. I successfully charged them with attempting to pervert the course of justice. They owed me a lot, so they were trying to tit for tat. And then they started doing stupid things. The Victorian government passed the Hoon legislation, which meant that they could pretty much, for any misbehaviour, just take your car away. Stupid things. So then I thought, okay, well, what way best to defend this? So then we step into the realm of the private, which was the person's personal representative. And I stepped up as that in the court, and straight away it gets the attention of the court. And the court then is left to try to get you to joinder with their jurisdiction. And that means stepping up to the bar table, because you've stepped into a maritime jurisdiction run by the Holy See. And I was arguing the point that I'm not the person, because when you look at all legislation, it has the word person. Person. And that is where their failing and their weakness is, especially here in Australia. But at the time, my best defence was to step up as the person's personal representative, which is an entity in probate, because this is what the whole system has converted you to through the Cesta Cuvée legislation, which was first brought in by King Henry VIII, and then in 1666 the really powerful legislation stepped in order to get the Cesta Cuvée Act through. the Westminster, they had to empty Parliament somehow. How did they do that?
Great fires in London.
Fire.
They set fire to London. And they emptied the Parliament. They got the Act through. And Article 1 of that legislation killed all of us at birth and put us into probate.
That's where our name is capitalised.
Yeah, but the name is the trap. Show me anywhere in the New Testament where these people, Christ included, had a second name. He was Jesus of
Nazarene and such and such.
Yeah. So the real trap that the Holy See has brought in over the dead is the person, the name. And they bring that through 3 different levels. So you've got capitis diminutio maxima, capitis diminutio media, and capitis diminutio minima. And they're the 3 categories of enslavement that they've got us under. And this can all be confirmed in the law dictionaries. It's been there since Adam was a boy.
And they really, when they took Latin and proper grammar out of the schools, that's when they started dumbing us down, so that most people couldn't understand.
But we've been settling the world, especially Australia, the United States. When we go to these countries where we have to scratch out a living out of the soil, so we haven't had a lot of time to turn around and study the intricacies of the laws that the system has been putting in place. But now we're in a position where we're fairly comfortable and we've got this incredible communication through the internet. So we've got this massive, it's like the old Alexandria Library has been reborn through the internet. And now we're able to sit back and we're able to absorb all this knowledge and go, wow, gee, we've been screwed over or what? But there's a remedy. Where there's a problem, there's always a remedy. And you just got to look for that remedy. Even in our statute books, the statute books that these crims create, there is always a remedy. If there's a controversy, there's a remedy somewhere. Then you have to learn to look for it. And this is why lawyers have been there to take away that key of knowledge and say, okay, well, if you've got a problem with the law, well, come to us. Okay, so what's the legal profession? Who's their allegiance to?
Well, initially it's the bar, isn't it?
The bar, supposedly.
The first responsibility is to the court as officers.
They're officers
under the legal uniform
of the court.
Application Act 2014.
Yeah,
and
so,
its equivalents in every other state.
But going right back, let's go back to, when this bloke by the name of Christ was cruising around. And he said, through Luke 11, verses 46 through to 52, look out for the lawyers.
Nothing has changed.
2,000 years ago, the warning was there. Why? Because the lawyers are there to feather their own nest, first and foremost, but to take away that key of knowledge and hide access to remedy unless you go through one of their people. Now we've got lawyers, they run the whole court system. The judges are lawyers. This is where we've fallen down. In one of my court cases back in 2008 or something, I actually put the presumption on the court to show where the bar and the legal profession have any jurisdiction over any of the courts. When I was confronted with silence.
But the judges don't
How did it end?
nothing. The judges don't. Most judges don't know any of this.
They don't, but the higher up you go,
Where
they're
you're
under it.
Where you're operating, yes, but my experience has been with most magistrates and judges, they haven't got a clue. They really
The magistrates, some don't, but they're just operating in belligerence.
Yeah.
And they just stand there and say, listen, I'm the gatekeeper. Right. So the first question that should come out of our mouths are, is this a
Chapter 3.
or quorum Judas? Is this a quorum Judas or is this a quorum? Okay. So, and your question was?
How did that case end?
2008.
In 2008. Yeah, well, the Office of Public Prosecutions, who I was up against, this is in the county court, come over to me after the court had tried to get me to join them, and just leant down and said to me, listen mate, this has got nothing to do with you, have a lovely day, see you later. Because I had handballed the obligations of the person back to the state. Who owns the person?
The state, they graded them.
They copy claim that name the moment your parents fill out that live birth record. It goes straight to copy claim. And they take full ownership of all derivatives of your name. Uppercase, lowercase, backwards, forwards, you name it. Those words appear on that live birth record. They own it lock, stock and barrel, and they've converted it to a trust as the grantor to that trust. So what role are you playing once you go and pick up that birth certificate? Trustee.
Yes, the holder.
You're the trustee. And what can a trustee do?
Well, it gets a lot of obligations and duties.
We're just to act in the best interests of the person.
Yeah, they have to do exactly as what the person is prescribed to do. And while you hold on to that title, you're holding on to the office of trustee. But in trust law, you can step out. There's no one forcing you to be there. And this is what I did. I stepped out of that office and said, hang on. I'm not the trustee anymore, guys. I'm the beneficiary. I'm the executor administrator. And that's what a person's personal representative is. In probate law, a person's personal representative, by definition, and I've gone right back to Halesbury's first edition of law, which is the Books of Authority, Laws of England, Books of Authority. I became the person's personal representative, which is a separate jurisdiction that can only be heard in Queen's Bench or King's Bench. It's the only place a person's personal representative can be heard. Now, Victoria done away with access to Queen's Bench in 1986. There's only two states that have that access, and that's Western Australia and South Australia. So, but it's gone into, of course, that much ruckus within the system that Western Australia and South Australia are now basically just saying, well, we don't care, we're just going to do whatever we like. And we will just keep pushing you to where we want. And what's their aim?
Control.
No, they're going to hand over the sovereignty of Australia to Israel.
For what return? What?
To create a one world sort of.
This is under the one world government. So when was the words one world government expressed first?
1940.
How about
The Bible.
1529 under Ignatius Loyola? That's where the New World Order was born.
What's Ignatius?
Ignatius Loyola he raised up the Jesuit movement.
Initially.
He initiated the Jesuit movement.
So that's its inception point.
That was when it was incepted.
15?
29.
Darryl, I've got a problem with the prothonotary at the Supreme Court. If they play up or mislead and deceive, is it the Sergeant at Arms I go to next, or is there anyone I can go to?
Again, we come back to the presumption, and we put the onus on those who are trying to exercise authority over us as to where that authority comes from. Please show me the evidence. Evidence. Once you use the word presumption, they are compelled to provide evidence. They have authority. Now we're in the county court at the moment on probably the biggest case in Australia's history, and you're not hearing about it, of course. And that is, we're challenging the Australian Taxation Office and the Deputy Commissioner of Taxation.
Yeah.
And the Deputy Commissioner of Taxation started attacking Mike Palmer, who I do the Know Your Rights with. And they attacked him because they screwed up. They prevented him from leaving the country. Out of Sydney, he was due to go to a seminar in Malaysia or Thailand for a week. And his name was flagged at the international terminal. And it was the ATO who brought the flag up. And it was a mistake. It was another Mike Palmer. They'd screwed up. No news there. A bunch of bureaucrats screw up all the time. That was on a Saturday, and they held him back for a number of hours at Sydney Airport, and they said, well, sorry mate, we're not letting you out of the country, so you're going to have to go back to Melbourne. So he did. He flew back to Melbourne, and he was on to me, and I said, right, well, find out what's actually going on. Monday he did. He got an admission from the tax office they'd screwed up, and the federal police. So then he said, well, okay, what do we do? And I said, right, hit ComInsure. Hit ComInsure. They screwed up. Don't go to court. Just go straight to the to the purse.
Yeah.
Cough up.
Yeah.
Here's the court precedents. Now pay up. We've got an admission of fault. Now just pay up.
Yeah.
We're claiming $770,000 because this is what the court found in Supreme Court for this case, and another one that was 250 and 500,000 and da 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 da. And then the system responded, the ComInsure responded, and they said, oh, this is ridiculous, we'll give you 5,000.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Okay, we've got an admission. Now we're on a negotiation train. So we eventually got $15,000 out of them, and they went away with their tail between their legs. But then the tax office jumped in and said, hang on, we don't like this, so we're going to audit you. We're going to go through you like a dose of salt. Oh, really? Terrific. So, you are who? And where's your authority come from?
The ATO with an ABN number, an ACN number.
And that started, this was Deputy Commissioner Ravanello, Robert Ravanello. And of course, a couple of years ago he was under the spotlight for his son was exposed to reap millions of dollars worth of
Not
So
paying
go-
ATO.
It's a pay-as-you-go withholding Ponzi scheme.
Yeah,
Very
this
large.
was exposing the money laundering side of things, which is another story. But essentially, what happened, they threatened court action, we threatened court action, and they threw him into court, and we then put the presumption back onto the court and the plaintiff. And it was Judicial Registrar Anne Tran, who, full credit to her, I mean, we were shocked at her ruling. She was just like to the letter, and she followed what we presented, and she put an order back on the plaintiff, the ATO, to show traceability back to the Constitution. The ATO solicitors did not know which way to go.
How many solicitors have there been?
They've so far been through 4 solicitors, there's been 4 barristers, and Robert Ravanello has retired.
Yeah.
Funny about that.
Yeah.
He's done a run.
Yep.
Has it?
Yep.
He's gone.
Yeah.
So-
We used to be
Where's it at? Where's that case at now?
It's because it's in front of a registrar. Basically, the registrar is trying to establish as to whether there should be a trial. They're looking at a trial in early next year, but she needs to be convinced that both parties consent, essentially. This is, what she's taking the place of is in old English law, and what's still exercised to this day regularly in America is what's called a grand jury. So a grand jury makes a decision as to whether you should go to trial. And this is the real powerhouse of the jury system. There's a grand jury. And how many people sit in a grand jury?
23.
23.
Last one was in 68, right?
Yeah, I think it was actually earlier. I think it was about 63 or something. There was only been about 3 grand jury decisions here in Australia. I think in Victoria.
Do you think they're a good idea?
Yes, I do, because your peers make a decision upon presentation from both the plaintiff and the defendant as to whether there should be a case. And what are they going to rely on? Evidence. This is a scary thing. Evidence, not hearsay. And this is what the system's been relying on since 2009. Not only here in Australia, but all around the Commonwealth. So where do you think this is all coming from? Unidrop.
Yeah.
This is Rome dictating all these changes.
And the ATO has a relationship back to Unidrop?
No.
No.
They are an agent
DC.
of the IRS.
Yeah, so, and that's registered like in the District of Columbia, Washington DC, all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
But the IRS has also found, through Trump, he's really been stirring the pot over there.
Right.
And they've got a body of evidence now to say the IRS don't legally exist at all.
Independent
The IRS, the
Inland Revenue Service.
Inland Revenue Service.
Service in America.
They're the tax collector for the American. So our ATO, if you go to the IRS website, you can actually download any IRS tax form and file it here with the ATO, and they accept it. We've tried this. They are an agent of the IRS.
So who's that? Sorry, it's interesting trying to piece all this together. I've got the basic sort of scenario that I've already learned, but where does the Vatican fit in? Because they've got their own acts. You'd be aware of that. Their own acts have been ascended by Parliament in relation to all the property they own in Australia. I've only just glanced at those. I only found them last week actually. But they're acts that the Roman Catholic Church has had signed off.
There's been no such thing as a separation between church and state. That's the public misnomer that's been there to satisfy those who have been saying we need to get the church and state separated. No, they're very much a part of each other. And there is a saying that we can utilise, and I've been promoting for a number of years in order, and this is what I also used in front of the courts. Your status in Latin against the Holy See is to state that you are de jure solemn et natural, which is, in English, separate from the Holy See. So, and when you look at the Bill of Rights, 1688, the whole of the Bill of Rights is about how governments operating within the Commonwealth must have nothing to do with the Holy See. In fact, it's inscribed in their oath. Every single member of government in the Commonwealth must take, it's not shall, must take the oath as prescribed in the Bill of Rights. And it's cited.
But we haven't got a Bill of Rights in Australia, do we?
Yeah, it's the 1688 English Bill of Rights.
I see.
How do you call out the jurisdiction of the Holy See and all that maritime stuff? What do you do to kind of call
You
that
bring
out?
on the presumption.
Sorry?
Bring on the presumption. Show us the traceability back to the Constitution. That's your safety net.
So that clause there, that statement is gold.
Gold.
Do you actually have to say presumption of evidence, or can you just ask for evidence?
No, presumption.
Why does it hold so much power?
Because they're compelled. It's a royal prerogative. It's an order, essentially, that once those who are claiming the authority have been put in on the spot, are compelled to reply with evidence. It can't be just, oh, well, we've got this piece of legislation here that says we've got the authority. Oh, yeah, terrific. But where is that piece of legislation traceable back to the Constitution? I want to see the traceability.
Could you use that term as a blanket cover for an entire case? Up front?
Absolutely. Nothing can move forward until jurisdiction has been absolutely established.
Excellent.
Doesn't matter what they've got you in there for, regardless. Jurisdiction, jurisdiction, jurisdiction. It is absolutely paramount. There are US Supreme Court cases that back this up, going back a couple of hundred years.
It's a
And
threshold
English
issue.
further.
And the other thing with the King James, why I always look for a genuine one to take, in the front couple of pages, you've got to look for the passage where it says, and not be traduced by popish persons. Look for that. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick, because the trust, I believe, don't know, the trust, the first concept of a trust came into existence in the 13th century when the Roman Catholic Pope at the time declared that all the earth and everything on it is held in trust because they're God's representatives on the planet. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I saw that a couple of years ago. And that was where the concept of a trust came into existence, right? Is that correct?
Well, yeah, there was a papal bull where the Holy See declared that they owned the whole universe.
Yeah, it was the whole universe.
Yeah,
But
the whole
it's-
universe.
But that's
Let's
the-
not stop it, just the earth.
Yeah, but the trust
You can have
concept,
a
which is
system
in
in trust.
cases
No,
of
trust
law,
came before that.
was invented by the Roman Catholics
The
according to
Jews
this.
have been using
But-
it for centuries.
But the Roman Catholics are a rebirth of
I don't know.
Egyptian.
Yeah, I believe that, but it's all come
Well,
from
no,
before
it's
that,
actually-
though, I think.
It's actually now on the public forum.
Yeah.
And this is what I said a little bit earlier. I said, so what are they all leading to? What are they leading us to? Israel. But what is it that they're going to impose? It's called the Noahide laws. The 7 Noahide laws. They've already fulfilled law number 7. And that is they've established the World Court. All right, there's 70 rabbis who are overseeing this World Court. So they will dissolve the ICC and the international jurisdiction, and it will fall back over to Israel. And that's where it will be implemented. Now, this has already been installed in the US as public law, and it's public law number 102-14, and it was established and ratified through the President and the Congress in 1991, okay, through George Bush Senior. And there's a whole speech you can download relating to Public Law 102 and how the no-hide laws will be what we're targeting. And what they're building up to is they want all of these member nations to Unidroid to hand over their sovereignty to Israel, the one world order.
Why is it?
Just backtracking a little bit, when you said you use the word presumption in the court,
Yeah.
that you showed me the paper trail back to the Constitution.
Traceability.
Now, traceability. Now, do you quote not the 1901 Constitution, not the 1976 one? Do you have to be specific? Because they'll always go 1976, won't they?
Which is the 76?
76 or 73, what is it?
75.
Only one.
Sorry, 75.
There's only one, that's 90.
Yeah, I know there's one, but then a lot of these laws have been...
Yeah, but don't forget, each state has their own constitution. Every state. Victoria's got its own constitution, New South Wales, Queensland.
Albert might be referring to the phony one, Darryl, the green snot one.
Yeah.
No, you're referring to the Australia Act.
Australia, exactly. Yeah.
The Australia Act 1986. Okay. Now, the Australia Act 1986 was... You've got to look at the history of the Australia Act to fully understand and grasp where that's sort of coming from. And it started in 1973 under Whitlam. He, in order to bring about this colour of law, he had to be seen to re-establishing the whole system. So he installed a new executive. And that executive came in under what's called the Royal Styles and Titles Act 1973, and that was the Queen of Australia. And when you read the Royal Styles and Titles Act, second paragraph in the introduction says that there is this Queen of Australia only has jurisdiction over the land. She doesn't have jurisdiction over the people.
Wow.
When you read the Commonwealth Constitution, it only cites the people, whereas the people of Victoria, New South Wales, And section 51(2) of the Constitution says, with respect to taxation, that there can be no discrimination in taxation through the states or parts of states. The people are the parts of states. The Commonwealth Constitution only refers to the society. There is no definite fence between Victoria and New South Wales, South Australia. It's an imaginary line in the minds of the society. And yet the Royal Styles and Titles Act established an authority over the land. They could not bring about a change or legislation over the people without a referendum. Because the Queen of the United Kingdom had that jurisdiction sewn up. Now, the key clause in the Constitution is Clause 2. Right? Clause 2. That's the key. And I can read that out for you.
And 5.
Out of my well and truly used up Constitution, which has seen better days. well and
Clause
truly.
5 say something like
Like
that,
a good
all
Bible,
courts and
bit
judges
well
have to abide by the
No, that's clause 5. Clause 2 is the key. The provisions of this Act referring to the Queen shall extend to Her Majesty's heirs and successors in the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. So where does this Queen of Australia come in? It doesn't fulfil clause 2. It cannot, until
Amazing.
proven, show us that the Queen of Australia is an heir or successor to the Queen of the United Kingdom. She cannot have any pretended titles. Okay? Pretended titles, and that's section 13.8 of the Bill of Rights. No pretended titles to the monarch. These people foresaw all of these problems in 1688. They drafted it well and truly in finite detail.
They were geniuses.
Absolute geniuses. They saw what Rome was capable of. Absolutely, and they laid it out, chapter and verse, in that Bill of Rights. And that's a direct instruction to our Parliament. It's got nothing to do with you and me, other than when we start seeing a breach of that Bill of Rights coming through the Parliament, we then question it and say, well, you're obviously operating under a presumption that what you have imposed on us through this statute is law. Now show us. Show us your authority.
That's true.
Don't go in there and throw spears at them. Question them. Always question them. Put them on notice through a properly constructed question. And this is how our minds have to start working now when we confront the system. You're more than happy to comply once you show me your authority. Because the people have been installed as the supreme, absolute, uncontrollable authority. Deliberately. This is why the Australian Constitution is the best in the world. These people foresaw this. Again, they took these laws of England and they thought, gee, how about we do something really different? We'll take away parliamentary sovereignty, the ultimate power of Parliament, which is what Westminster does, and we'll hand it to the people. See what they do. And what have we done?
Ignored our rights. Ignored our rights.
She'll be right, mate.
It's not taught in school.
Darryl, with fee simple, could you do maybe a very brief hypothetical argument against the royal titles and titles having jurisdiction over the land? So tell me, maybe in 5 seconds or less, how you argue in court, well, how that's invalid and your fee simple is your ultimate ownership of your land, and how you can stand on it without them trying to take it away.
Well, your land falls under a grant in fee simple. Okay, if you want to look at the definition of that, you go to Victorian Property Law Act, section 18A, and it very clearly defines that a grant in fee simple gives you the birth inherited right to hand on that property to whomever you so please without being forced by a third party. But you're down as a tenant. So it's freehold property granted through the Crown. So you only have these limited rights relating to that land. But then, of course, anyone coming in as that third party to force licence against that property, whether that licence be in the form of a tax or whatever, or a caveat or whatever, then it can only be imposed through a proper Crown authority, because it's the Crown who hold the root and radical title to that land. The root and radical title.
And what's the Crown connect to?
The Crown is just the body of law. Forget about the physical hat. It's just a body of law. And that's all it is. So the monarchs, they just take an oath to uphold that body of law through the scripture. Because that's where the basis of that Crown law lies.
Does that mean that they are the ultimate liability, that they hold the ultimate liability? If things start to go wrong, then you take off the head of the Crown.
But
or the person who stands for the Crown.
It's contract. So
they've abused the Crown, right?
But hang on, you then go, when you're put into a situation where you sent any correspondence, which is always the first step, they'll send correspondence saying, well, you know, I've got a problem with what you're doing on your land, whatever that may be. So how do we respond?
Presumption.
Established jurisdictions.
That's right. Who the hell are you?
And if they ignore that and keep coming at you regardless, what then?
Then you notice them. You serve a notice on them. That's a formal attack. And a notice, even under their law, has weight.
Can I use that against the carriers of 5G? Say to them, or the Optus, or that, for presumption?
Well, essentially, you go back to the Constitution. And it's under Section 51, I think it's subsection 9, where the Parliament has the authority to draft legislation relating to telecommunications, telegraphic and other like services. So, you know, we've got to think this was drafted back in 1890s or actually around 1874 through to 1900, so we didn't have... But they foresaw these things, and this is why they put "and other like services." So then we put the onus back on government to say, well, show us that this is good government and that you have the authority to impose this legislation or allow this sort of input to our society without checks and balances. So where are the tests that have been done with respect to the 5G or whatever it is they're trying to impose? Show us that this has gone through the proper clinical trials. You know, we want a forensic examination done of your tests. And of course we know, and there's been admissions coming from those who are held responsible for this sort of input of technology, that they have not done these trials. So it's very simple. We've got to look for the simple answer. And we just go back and we say, well, show us you've done the test, because the words good government, good government doesn't allow these whatever services imposed upon us that could be detrimental to our health. And we fall back on what's known as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And Article 7 says that they require your consent to take part in any form of medical experiment. Because if they're conducting the trial through the implementation of these services, we'll just sit back and wait and see how many people suffer. Well, where is my consent?
But they do get people's consent. They do. As soon as you accept that phone and go, oh, I agree, they're doing it blatantly.
Yeah, that's to the contract.
Yeah.
But not to the implementation of the services. And this is where the Constitution
I'm
is.
respecting the health stuff and that. I've noticed that they're starting to put little warnings out
in the
now.
paper.
Yeah.
Don't hold it up to your ear. And so
They have since the very first mobile phone.
Have they?
You know, when I had my first mobile phone, The thing was called a brick.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
huge. And it had a warning sticker on it that says, do not have the aerial anywhere any closer than 1 metre
Yeah.
from your body while operating this phone. You know, it had a cord. So I had a long enough cord to do that. So, you know, the warning's always been there. So, but because we've allowed this to go on and having questioned those in the system, and especially Telstra, because they were government owned
Yeah.
at that
Still
time,
are.
we should have gone, well, okay, well, guys, why are you allowing this? How is this good government? Where did you get the authority to implement this?
What was the international covenant
On civil and political rights.
Okay.
Now that comes in under the Human Rights Commission Act, 1986. It's Commonwealth law.
You see, you use the term good government. Shouldn't it be good government?
Governance.
Government. Government, section 51 is government, the word government. But everything that the government implements through legislation is subject to this Constitution. Those words prevail right through the Constitution.
So how do you put a court on notice, or say a judge, or what's the instrument for actually doing that?
Well, you want to establish jurisdiction. So if you're standing there orally in front of the court, then you would put it to the court. Is this court under a presumption that it's operating as a Chapter 3 court?
Let's say I want to put them on notice with respect to a specific, you know, because we've covered quite a bit of ground, you know, 5G and Israel and the New World Order. But say we're in a specific jurisdiction, you know, and there's quite a few of them, and you want to, in that particular jurisdiction, does this cover all jurisdictions? Where I say you might be called an oral application. You know, to make an oral application, or
Yeah, well, when I submitted my paperwork in 2007 to the county court relating to the case against the Commonwealth, the first paragraph laid out the jurisdiction.
Right.
Okay, so I was seeking that the court stand in Chapter 3 as a prosecutor. So I was the prosecutor, I was the plaintiff.
Yeah.
And I established, with consent of the Commonwealth, which is what you need. You can't force a jury trial. So I was seeking that the court stand with a jury trial. But of course the Commonwealth, if they had rejected that, then we'd be compelled to negotiate and go back to accepting either a single judge or justices to fulfil the requirement of the court. But there is a hidden court that's sitting there that none of us, a lot of people haven't woken up to, and that's our Justice of the Peace. They are and were the original court. They were established back in the early or the mid to late 1200s, just after Magna Carta.
My query on the just JPs, right?
Yeah.
I've asked the JPs, a few of them, where did you get your authority from?
Right.
And then I said to them, are you a member of the Royal Victorian Association of Honorary Justices, which is a registered business in Elstonwick?
Yeah.
Now, if it's a registered business, isn't there not a conflict of interest by even you going to a JP who's a member of that?
Well, not so much matters what club they're a member of, as to what oath they've taken. That's the basis of...
Because the oath would suggest...
Because the oath is the law that brings that entity within, it puts the blinkers on them, and they are then bound under the legislation that's been established right back to 1279 as to what they can or cannot do. And they then seek direction from their clerk and from the plaintiff and from the defendant.
I actually phoned their office, but they never answered the phone, right? Just from my mobile or from the outside landline. But when I was into the Supreme Court, I said, "Oh, would you mind ringing this?" And they actually picked up the phone and started talking to me then, you know. So it's just another...
And the oath they have taken, is that publicly available?
Yes, yeah, you can download that oath.
So,
now, if that oath, as we've found since the 45th Parliament that I was involved with, they've now, because in the Constitution there's a schedule And in that schedule is the prescribed oath that all parliamentarians have to take.
Is that the
Now,
one
the
there?
45th Parliament, yeah, there we go. To Queen Victoria, now they're allowed to change that relating to the current monarch, and they did. They changed it to Queen Elizabeth II, and that's okay. Her heirs and successors according to law. So what's that reflect? Clause 2.
So where do you find that out?
Doesn't
Is
it?
that in the Constitution?
Yeah.